Now, let's head back to Brexit, of course, a big topic with the Business Secretary himself. For our part, let's turn our attention to Thomas Cole, former European Commission negotiator. He joins us now from St Albans. Tom, good to see you this morning. Go on then.
Good morning.
Tell us what's going to happen this week or in the next couple of weeks. Are we going to get there?
Well, I think obviously we've only got 2.5 weeks left to go. From my experience having worked for the European Commission, this is taking things very much to the wire. There are, of course, a number of issues still to be resolved, but the mood music yesterday, I think, was all around positive from what it had been a few days previously. And we'll have to see what happens in the coming days. I think what we know under all circumstances is that there will be a change to the relationship on the 1st of January. The million-dollar question is going to be, well, what is that change precisely going to be? And I think some clarity for all of us would be very much welcomed at this stage.
Yeah, it does rather feel, Thomas, that there may well be a way through the morass on the level playing field requirements.
Yes, I mean, that's essentially where things stand at the moment, that potentially there could be a way around this, of forms of arbitration if the UK were to decide to diverge from EU standards and EU rules. Of course, there is still the possibility that the EU could retaliate by putting tariffs in place. I think at the end of the day, this is where the trade-off is going to come. It's the question of whether or not a country in this day and age, in a very interconnected world, wants to have total sovereignty, or it wants to be able to have as frictionless and as free trading relationships with its largest trading partners. And I think that is obviously the ultimate question. That is a political decision for the UK government to take. But under all circumstances, as I'd like to reiterate, there will be changes on the 1st of January. I think it would not be unsurprising, at least, to see some kind of implementation period so that there isn't a kind of complete total change in the 1st of January. But that would, of course, require some kind of phased-in approach from the 1st of January, perhaps to the middle of next year onwards. But we will really have to see.
From your perspective, Thomas, just how justified is the frustration currently being expressed by the British government about the possibility of the European Union being able to apply tariffs unilaterally when they perceive some divergence in standards?
I think when it comes to the question of something like a justification or whether or not a position is reasonable or unreasonable, I mean, at the end of the day, this all boils down to realpolitik. The EU is larger than the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom is more exposed economically to the EU than vice versa. So when it comes to these kind of international talks, you do have the bigger players, the EU, the US, China, and you have the smaller players. And the United Kingdom, having decided to leave the European Union, has to, whether it likes it or not, accept that it will no longer be at the very top table. So whether or not it's something is justifiable, unfortunately, from the point of view of the UK government, when it comes to dealing with actors which are economically larger than the UK, whether it be the EU or the US, for example, this is, I guess, an unfortunate trade-off from taking back control and reclaiming national sovereignty, which has just become a reality of these kind of international negotiations.
Thomas, stay where you are. We have just heard from one of the key protagonists in all of this, the EU chief negotiator, Michel Barnier. He's been speaking to our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons.
Great patience, but is even your patience beginning to run calm and respect? And do you still think the very end? And are we near the very end, would you say? Yes. Are we approaching the end of the very end?
Will be when we will reach an agreement both on fair and free competition, and second, on the reciprocal access to waters and the markets.
And is that near?
Thomas, just in case you were struggling to make most of that out, as I think the rest of us were as well, Michel Barnier pointing out there the two sticking points that remain. In addition to that, it does rather feel, just from the language that he was using, approaching the end. I mean, he could well be talking about the fact that we're about to run out of track.
Yes, I mean, obviously there are 2.5 weeks to go. The 31st of December is a real deadline. Under the withdrawal agreement, which both sides approved and ratified, the transition period, which we're in at the moment, runs until the 31st of December. There was a possibility earlier this year to extend that by 1 year or 2 years. The UK government said under all circumstances they didn't want to do that. I can see a political way forward if there really is a desire to get things done, and both sides realise that the 31st of December isn't long enough, and perhaps a few more days or weeks are required. There would potentially be a way around that, but I mean, otherwise, the 31st of December really is a very fixed deadline, and we know from statements in the past I think by Michael Gove earlier this year, that the UK government had no intention of extending the transition period. So bearing that in mind, yes, there are only 2.5 weeks to go, and if a deal is to be found, then now is the time to do it. Bearing in mind, it's not just the time left for the negotiations. There's also the period of ratification.
Yeah.
On the EU side, the European Parliament, of course, needs to be involved and needs to sign this off. And from the UK side, of course, as well, there'll also need to be an element of scrutiny. I don't think it would be, desirable for either of those parliaments to want to have to rubber stamp something, in particular when we are talking about a future relationship which could last for years to come.
Just on a technical point, Thomas, whilst we have you, about the process of ratification, isn't it possible, because I can think of at least a couple of occasions on which the European Union has implemented a treaty before it's actually been ratified. I mean, that could happen here, presumably.
Yes, I mean, you could have something called provisional application. That happened in the EU's association agreement and free trade agreement with Ukraine, which was signed in 2014. Also happened in the EU-Canada trade agreement, CETA, in 2016. So there is a possibility for that to happen. That, of course, requires I guess, essential broad political understanding that that deal is the final one, and with no expectation that there will be any major changes to it. But yes, certainly it could be done. I think, however, what would be necessary is some kind of implementation phase. For example, when countries join the European Union, there is an implementation phase to allow them to bring all their standards and regulations in line with those of the EU. I think it would therefore be perfectly, it certainly wouldn't surprise me if there was to be something similar on this occasion as well.
Thomas, really good to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us.